Wildcats. I'm Zaire and Molly.
And I'm Molly Stitt.
And thank you for joining us on this.
Word to the Wildcat podcast.
On this cold day, we will be discussing the topic of health and wellness.
More specifically, within health and wellness, we'll be discussing mindfulness and how it really affects students' lives, emotionally, physically.
And how to kind of deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we should start out with a definition of mindfulness for those who may not know.
So, the Mayo Clinic defines mindfulness as a type of meditation in which you focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in the moment without interpretation or judgment. This can be done with stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical pain, which is pretty amazing to me.
When talking about mindfulness, I think it's important to talk about how it kind of applies to college students and how we can work through that. I guess we should discuss some ways it does apply to college students such as ourselves.
Yeah. So when I think of mindfulness, especially as a first-year student, I was already pretty independent when I left home, but even just especially being by myself, it gave me a lot of time to really think about myself, but also stepping back and trying to not necessarily dismiss my emotions, but looking from an outwards perspective, just so it kind of helps you gain a different perspective on yourself.
I think for me, going through college, mindfulness is something I was definitely very aware of because it kind of applies to all aspects of school. From you waking up in the morning to stressed with homework and classes and stuff like that. So it's definitely something that I had to learn to be very aware of and learn ways to kind of help reduce that stress. So what are some ways that we can implement mindfulness into our everyday lives?
Well, I personally practice yoga and meditation. Yoga is great for when I'm in physical pain, but also when I'm super stressed and I just need to find a way to kind of ground myself again. You can look up yoga for anything. My partner works in construction, and they even have yoga videos online for manual labor. And I just think that it's so applicable to everything, whether it's physical, emotional, well-being. It can just really ground you. And it's also pretty accessible.
Yeah, I would have to agree with, how accessible it is and how well it works.
Where can we find yoga, especially as college students, especially if we can't really afford classes downtown or something like that?
I think the best resource for that would just be YouTube. There's millions of free yoga videos for any and everything. It doesn't have to be just centered around stress.
Yeah.
It can just be a simple morning routine. There's beginner guides. There's pretty much everything. There's also, the realm of meditation and how that can help you with mindfulness. Meditation is something that I practice as well. There's a ton of videos on how to get started, and it's not something I think that's not talked about enough, because I feel like there's a misconception about it, or whatever. And you can there's meditations for even if you're just laying in bed and you just want to receive good energy or to switch your mood. There's a lot of things that you can kind of learn from those videos. Again, YouTube is the best resource for that because it's free. And yeah,
I agree with you, especially about that common misconception about it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that you have to think about nothing, or just trying to, it's really hard to think about nothing. And so those guided meditations on YouTube that you were talking about, it's a great way to focus on something, especially because meditation is focusing on stepping back from whatever we're thinking about, getting out of our own heads and thinking externally without that emotion behind it, whether that emotion is sadness or anxiety, just kind of thinking, okay, this is what I have here. Now, how can I look at this in a different perspective?
Yeah, I would have to agree. I feel like the majority of meditations I've started, it will start with clear your mind, but they also say it's okay if you can't think of completely nothing, because what does that even look like? So I think
Oh,
just going into it with, you know, a kind of seriousness about it. And I'm not saying that that will automatically fix your problems or even help you reduce stress, but I think it's worth a try for everyone who's
yeah.
looking for a free and accessible way to start that journey of reducing stress or having just a stronger start to the day.
Yeah. Um, Journaling is also something that can really help with mindfulness as a means of reflection because mindfulness does incorporate reflection greatly. Um, what are some ways that we can journal, especially if you aren't into prompts or anything like that?
I'm actually anti props because I feel like writing should just be kind of a free experience. That's why when people ask me, like, how did you get into writing about your feelings or your emotions or even poetry? It was just kind of a freeing experience. I feel like even the diaries or journals that come predated or like force you to write every day aren't good, because I feel like that adds more anxiety, because if you don't have time to write that day, then you skipped a day, and then, it throws everything off. So I just feel like a blank journal that you can get anywhere is the best way to kind of express those feelings, and you write what you write. And if the next day you don't feel like writing, or the next week you don't feel like writing, it's fine. So that's the best way, that I would recommend to get into writing. Poetry is a little bit different because it's more centered around a creative mind. So it takes a lot more focus than you just like jotting down your thoughts. So it's definitely something you have to really be in the mood for and kind of passionate about to create that work of poetry. But if it's something that you want to start, I recommend it too, because poetry is a great outlet as well. There's not as much restriction as a traditional like story format, but you can pretty much make poetry whatever you want to make it.
That was beautiful. Love that. Um, I, w- Especially with those dated journals, I really resonated with that because I would feel so much stress when I wouldn't be able to write that day. It would be like the same amount of stress that I felt if I missed a homework assignment. So it took me a lot to realize that I was doing it for myself and no one else, and that if I missed a day, the world wasn't going to crash and burn. So I also started getting journals with no written dates because why put yourself in that situation if dates and deadlines are tend to stress you out?
I agree. I feel like with journaling, once you kind of get in the habit, you'll naturally do it daily if you like, make it a part of your routine. But kind of starting out the gate, forcing yourself to write something every single day isn't the best choice. I think the last time I wrote in my journal was like 4 months ago. So,
I wrote in my journal the other day, and I think it was 6 months
yeah,
prior was my
I think I'm
last
gonna
journal
write in
entry.
it today. But I mean, that's just life. Don't stress yourself out over it.
No.
Which leads us to our next kind of point of um, giving yourself grace and time to really heal and to adjust to the academic lifestyle, if that makes sense. Um, you can't expect perfection or for you to be, great overnight. It kind of takes time to learn how to be mindful and to process things and to even learn different outlets. You can't, let's say you're looking for outlets for stress reduction, you can't just go through and try all those outlets in one day. It's kind of great to pick a day, pick a thing and try it, or else, you're not giving it your full attention. If you're just like quickly watching one yoga video, then moving on to meditation, then trying journaling all in one night, you're not going to most likely find something that resonates with you. So the best advice would be to just, try things over a certain time period, and the one that works for you will stick out. And there's multiple ways also to handle it that we didn't even mention. So it's really a singular experience for the person.
Yeah, definitely. These are just some
Hmm.
ideas, but when something brings you peace
Hmm.
and centers you, and you feel that your energy is at its highest when you're doing that
Hmm.
activity, you're doing something right. Music is something amazing. People can use that as an outlet, and whether it's listening or playing music, and doesn't have to be playing for others, but
Hmm.
just always doing it for yourself because mindfulness, it is about you. and just taking that opportunity to be selfish in that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we're, highlighting the accessibility of a lot of these resources, because a lot of times society has a way of being out of touch with the average person and what people can afford and just people's, personal reservations about things. And so, you know, I've been around people that have recommended like retreats, and the average person can afford, a $7,000 week retreat somewhere to like really learn these methods. So I think it's good to kind of talk about these resources. And yeah, even reading is a great resource for me, because that's something I do when I'm extremely stressed. It just takes my mind off of the entire situation. Books are easily accessible. There's a library on campus, so
Yeah.
there's many ways to go about it.
Yeah. One specific book that I found really helpful in my journey with mindfulness was Wired for Joy, A Revolutionary Method for Creating Happiness by Laurel Mellon. And she kind of talks about how even from when we're young, we have these wires in our brain. And whether it's how our parents taught us or media or in school, for how to deal with situations and how we think about them and the phrases that we say, and how we can rewire our brain so we can experience more joy and not just joy. So like they talk about happiness and joy as different things, because happiness can be something bought or something temporary in the moment, but joy is the true experience that you're having. And it doesn't mean being joyful all the time, but when you are joyful, being able to acknowledge it and being able to acknowledge that you're not always going to be joyful. And but it teaches you how to rewire it so you can get there a bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets faster every single time you practice it. And I felt very proud of myself every time I realized that I was, quote unquote, rewiring my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really helped with my communication with others too, and being able to listen effectively.
Yeah, those are great points. And do you know any other resources that kind of highlight mindfulness?
Yeah. There's also podcasts, a lot of podcasts that specialize in mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to Wired for Joy, the Adult Chair by Michelle Chalfant is a great podcast where she kind of talks about how we have these chairs as people. We have our child's chair, we have our adolescent chair, and the adult chair. And in these different things, you kind of bounce in between. When you're a child, you kind of have short fuses. Your ego's pretty strong because you're not able to think externally. Then you have your adolescent. You're pretty selfish, also can't think outside of yourself, but you're also slowly becoming more aware. And then the adult chair, think of that as like your highest self-actualization, where you are able to use these methods and kind of implement them in your life. And you're not always in your adult chair, you're not always in your adolescent chair, but she kind of talks through how you can adjust through those in a safe way. Safe meaning for others and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, because words hurt, actions hurt, and she kind of helps you guide through all that stuff. Also apps, free apps. The website Mindful lists 5 free mindfulness apps. Insight Timer, Smiling Mind, My Life Meditation, UCLA Mindful, Healthy Minds Program.
Mm-hmm.
They have guided meditations, prompts if you're interested in that. Stuff to just provoke thought in your daily life if technology is more your thing, or if you're looking for something very easily accessible.
Yeah, there's also apps, for the things that we mentioned earlier, like that provide journaling prompts and poetry prompts, and even daily affirmations for those who just kind of want something quick. You can set it so that it gives you a new affirmation every single day. before your day starts. And for some people, that's really helpful to kind of see that as the first thing that they see when they wake up. So it just really depends on the person that you are. And I also recommend to just try everything. Don't limit yourself to one thing, because sometimes a combination of things work as well, as opposed to just, forcing yourself to just stick to, yoga or meditation.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said about that. It's nice having those affirmations just pop up on your phone sometimes. And affirmations are very powerful. Um, if you write an affirmation down on a card and you tape it up on your mirror and you look at it every day,
Mm-hmm.
may not feel like progress, but every time you look at it, you're making progress.
Yeah, it's
So
just a
I
way
love that.
to insert, positivity into your life. Even if you don't believe it at the moment, it's still great to just wake up and have that be the first thing you see.
Yeah, I agree. So circling back to meditation,
Mm-hmm.
there are some key ones that have really stuck out to me over the years and have really centered myself even when my brain's going all crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So one specific one that I loved is imagining the lighting of a candle, and like you're closing your eyes, imagine like a dark candle, a
Mm-hmm.
dark room, and there's just a candle sitting there. You light it and you're watching the flame flicker. The wax starts melting and dripping down, and just keeping your focus on that candle. And that can really help center you. Also, echoing in your brain, calm and relax. Calm and relax can help center during meditation to help center you back. And also, imagination. Imagination's a fun one because you can imagine a whole place in your head that's just yours for where you can go when you're feeling stressed or sad. Um, and you can slowly get yourself there by imagining a hillside or steps and guiding yourself down those steps. And focusing on what you see, hear, taste, smell, feel. And because really centering yourself is a big step in moving forward to get the real work done. And that's what it is, work. But those are some of my favorite meditations to help center myself before to calm down or if I want to do some work.
Another form of mindfulness that I think we forgot to mention is therapy. That can also fit
Yes.
into there, because, there's also this misconception that therapy has to be something that brings out your darkest and, most vulnerable moments in life, but it doesn't have to be like that. Some people like to keep it at a certain level where they leave, better than they came in. And again, this is all different for everyone, but there are therapists out there that can also help you and aid you dramatically in like the realm of mindfulness. So,
Yeah.
the process of obtaining a therapist is difficult. But that's something that, I recommend everyone researching and seeing, what your insurance covers, what the free options are, and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's something that I recommend.
And counseling services is great.
Yeah.
They're amazing. If you're looking for something more accessible on campus, they also have the wellness line. They're posted on the Instagrams, they're in the bathrooms, all of that. We can also provide the resources.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically, I love what you said about therapy because there's so many different types of therapy. There's therapy that specializes if you're religious, if you're more
Yeah.
spiritual,
There's
Christian,
something for
Muslim.
everyone.
Yeah, there's one for everyone. And they focus on different types, like relationship, wellness, stress. You can talk about how your day was at work, or if you're struggling with like school and stuff like that. And they can give you the tools to help focus with your testing skills, how to get yourself in the mindset for homework. So therapy, I hope the stigma around therapy and counseling goes away because therapy and counseling, amazing.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I think we pretty much covered, all the outlets of mindfulness that we wanted to cover. So yeah.
Yeah. We hope that these tips were helpful for somebody out there, because the first step is always the hardest, but it's nothing to be shy about because everybody goes through it.
Yeah.
And even if you're not going through it, it's great to get these
Yeah. And
tools in your little tool bag.
and I want the biggest takeaway to be just, be open to everything and to try everything, and yeah. So I think that would be the biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Wildcats, for tuning in. Streaming is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and 88.1 The Berg.
Make sure you tune into our next episode.
Thank you, Zaire, for this amazing conversation.
Thank
I
you,
love
Molly.
talking with you about mindfulness and all these great resources. And
Vice versa.
yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see you Wildcats later.
Yeah.